Madam President, I come to the floor today to discuss the stagnant Obama economy and how Obamacare is making things worse. This Monday marks the 5th anniversary of the day the President signed his trillion-dollar stimulus bill into law. In remarks he gave in Denver that very day he signed the bill, the President stated that the legislation marked the beginning of the end of the nation's economic troubles. 5 years later, however, the end of the nation's economic troubles is nowhere in sight. The headlines of the jobs report released Friday say it all. The headline from the Associated Press said, U.S. economy may be stuck in slow lane for long run. New York Times headline, weakness continues as 113,000 jobs are added in January. From CBS News, another month of weak job growth raises slowdown fears. From the Wall Street Journal, U.S. adds 113,000 jobs in latest worrying sign on growth. From Reuters, U.S. employment fails to rebound strongly from winter chill. Well, Madam President, before passage of the stimulus, Presidential Advisor Christina Romer predicted that the stimulus bill would reduce the unemployment rate to 5% by the year 2014. In fact, over the past 5 years, the unemployment rate has never come close to falling that low. Last month's unemployment rate was 6.6%, and if so many people hadn't dropped out of the labor force over the past several years, that number would be even higher. If the labor force participation rate were the same as it was when President Obama took office, our current unemployment rate would be a staggering 10.5%. Despite the fact that the recession technically ended 55 months ago, we're still nowhere near where we need to be in terms of economic recovery. CBS News reported on Friday that the economy would have to gain an average of 285,000 jobs per month for the next 3 years just to get us back to where we were before the recession. Yet job creation for the past year hasn't even come close to that. In fact, our economy has averaged just 180,000 new jobs per month approximately over the past year. If we continue at that same rate, it will take us over 5 years to return to where we were before the recession. Madam President, President Obama's economic policies have left our economy mired in stagnation, and his health care law is making things even worse. Last week, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office released a new report on Obamacare. It found that Obamacare will result in the equivalent of 2.5 million fewer full-time jobs over the next 10 years. 2.5 million fewer jobs. Our economy is millions of jobs away from where it needs to be. Our labor force participation rate is near a 35-year low. And the President's health care law is going to result in 2.5 million fewer full-time jobs. Madam President, how will that work? Well, the CBO report made clear that Obamacare provides disincentives to work, particularly for those at the low-income end of the spectrum. An individual receiving Obamacare subsidies to pay for his or her health insurance may decide not to accept more hours or a higher-paying job so that he or she doesn't exceed the income cap for receiving subsidies. At the higher end of the wage spectrum, workers may decide not to rise too far up the ladder so that their income doesn't reach the point at which it would be subject to Obamacare taxes. Thus, Obamacare essentially traps workers in lower-paying jobs, putting a de facto limit on the prosperity of literally millions of Americans. Madam President, the CBO reinforces that notion not just by projecting that 2.5 million people will drop out of the workforce, but also by projecting that those who stay in the workforce will earn less. According to one analysis of the CBO report, Obamacare will reduce total wages by an estimated $70 billion per year. Without question, most of this burden will be placed on lower and middle-income families who are already struggling to make ends meet. Furthermore, by providing Americans with disincentives to work, Obamacare will limit our economic growth. As the editors of the National Review put it, and I quote, "The depth of the Obamacare crater in the labor force isn't some abstract unemployment rate, but the lost value of the work those Americans would have done," end quote. Americans working creates economic growth. It's as simple as that. Encouraging Americans to work less or quit work altogether will undermine American prosperity and American values, American families, I should say, security. And those who find work and are willing and able to fulfill their jobs deserve wages that are unhindered by a government takeover of health care. Combine the CBO report with our experience of Obamacare so far, and the future does not look promising. Lower-income Americans living off meager salaries and government health care subsidies just to get by. Middle-income Americans struggling to pay higher health insurance premiums and deductibles. Upper-income Americans and small business owners too reluctant to create jobs and wealth for fear that they'll be subjected to ObamaCare's burdensome taxes and regulations. That's not the kind of future any American desires, but that's exactly the future Obamacare is bringing us. In fact, for too many Americans, that future is already here. With ObamaCare's full implementation this year, Americans are facing huge premium increases and steep hikes in their out-of-pocket costs. They're losing access to their doctors and hospitals, and all too often, they're facing fewer hours or fewer benefits at their jobs as their employers struggle to comply with ObamaCare's taxes and mandates. Even the President has tacitly acknowledged the burdens his health care law places on employers by once again delaying one of the law's job-destroying mandates. While I'm glad some businesses will get relief until 2016, Congress should go further, much further, and ensure that every single American is protected from this disastrous law. Madam President, we can do better than Obamacare and the President's economic policies. The President has called for 2014 to be a year of action, and Republicans couldn't agree more. It's past time to take action to start reversing Obamacare's damage and finally get our economic recovery off the ground. Almost 2 weeks ago, the Obama State Department released its 5th environmental review showing that the Keystone XL pipeline would have no significant impact on global carbon emissions. There is strong bipartisan support in both houses of Congress for approving that pipeline and the 42,000 jobs it will support. The President needs to stop pandering, Madam President, to far-left environmentalists and immediately approve the pipeline and the good-paying jobs it will open for Americans. Next, the President should pick up that phone he keeps talking about to call the Senate Majority Leader and tell him to bring the Bipartisan Trade Promotion Authority legislation to the floor. Passing Trade Promotion Authority would help U.S. farmers, ranchers, entrepreneurs, and job creators gain access to 1 billion consumers around the globe. The Majority Leader needs to stop obstructing the jobs this bill would create and join members of both parties to pass this important legislation. Finally, the President should throw his support behind a repeal of the medical device tax in his health care law. This tax on life-saving medical technologies like pacemakers and insulin pumps is forcing medical device companies to send American jobs overseas. There is strong bipartisan support for repealing the tax, and the President should add his. Madam President, far too many Americans have spent the past 5.5 years of the Obama presidency struggling to get by. Household income has fallen. Health care costs have risen. Jobs and opportunity have been few and far between. For many Americans, the possibility of a secure economic future seems further and further out of reach. Madam President, it doesn't have to be this way. We can turn our economy around by abandoning the President's failed economic proposals and embracing the kind of legislation that will open up new jobs and opportunities for the American people. The 3 proposals I've outlined above are a good place to start. I hope the President will join Republicans and Democrats to get these priorities done. Madam President, I yield the floor.